Good afternoon. My name is George Lamb with Nextivity, and in this webinar, we're going to talk about some of the new features and functions that are available with the portal. And when I say we, I mean me and Steve Van Skyke, who's actually going to help us out. Steve's also going to talk quite a bit about optimization and what we can do to make sure that we get the absolute most out of our installs. So Steve, I think I'm just going to hang out here in the background. I will take questions if they come up. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you run with it.
Okay, again, my name is Steve Van Skyke for Nextivity, a solution architect, and I will be talking about Quatra today and optimization through the portal. For those of you that have deployed Quatra systems before, the systems are largely automatic in nature, but that doesn't mean that when you're done installing the systems that you can't take a look at the information that's available on the portal or make use of some of the new features that'll help you get the most out of your systems or help you guide you if there's anything you could do to possibly improve performance. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and we'll get started. As you know, for those of you that maybe don't know us too well, we're basically an engineering company, and we make equipment for about 200 operators around the world, and our Quatra system is our enterprise solution in buildings. And it is connected to the WAVE portal in the cloud. This is your management solution to be able to check on your systems. It's how we perform software updates and take a look at system performance. And there are a number of features available on the portal that are only there if you're looking at the portal that, again, you can utilize to optimize your systems. You must be on the latest software in order to utilize these new features. That is -044 of your network unit code. So if you do not have this software on your systems, they should update automatically unless you have software updates disabled. And they will update within the next 24 hours because it's an automatic background function, and you can push the software manually from the options menu as well. And then you will see some of these features show up. Some will already be there, but some won't. All right, what is optimization? Here we're breaking down a Quatra project really into two pieces. One is RF distribution, and then the second one is optimization. So the RF distribution is really just getting your Quatra system set up, doing your site planning. Hopefully you've done a site survey, so you know the best place to put your donor antenna. You know where your hardware should go. And you've tried to achieve good isolation between your coverage unit and your donor antennas or the network unit itself, and have chosen the right antenna for the job, right? Because the different donor antennas will have certainly an effect of the outcome signal quality of your system. So we've assumed that all of that has been done for number one, and we're going to dive right into number two, which is optimizing your system. Which is really just, again, taking a look at it to make sure everything looks good, and possibly doing things like aiming your donor antenna, right? And the new features that we're going to talk about are manual band selection we've added so that you can choose your own bands if necessary for a given system. Aiming the donor antenna, this has changed quite a bit. It's very, very different, but the new method is there for you on the Quatra 1000 and 2000 systems. And then checking the RF KPIs. You know, we talk here about signal quality a lot. Good signal in, good signal out. Quatra systems have up to 100 dB of gain, so we're less concerned about pointing our donor antenna just at the strongest signal source. We would like to bring in a good quality signal. And checking those RF KPIs on the portal has just been made a little bit easier with some helpful hints, and I'm going to show you some pictures of that. All right, there is a prerequisite to this, which means that you have the system installed, it's been powered up, and you've commissioned it, and you have cleared any outstanding alarms. That means that your LEDs on the network unit and coverage units should be solid green. Your system is in the relay state. The only one that That might not be true for that is if you've already done antenna aiming, but again, that's going to be covered here. When you go to the system asset screen, some of you may have noticed that settings has changed. We used to have different settings kind of in different spots, but now they're all encapsulated under one menu choice called settings, which is a scrollable page. In order to make use of manual band selection, go to settings and click on it, and then you're going to scroll down about halfway down the page, and you will come to manual band selection. You'll only see the bands that your Quatra system supports. They will all natively be checked because our native mode is an automatic mode where the system will determine itself which channels, which bands should be relayed. But if you have a specific need at a site and you'd like to disable certain bands, you can do that. On a Quatra 2000, which is a dual carrier system, if you disable a band, say band 4, you would be disabling it for both of the operators. But this comes in handy if you're connecting to a small cell and you really want, you just don't want it to even think about other channels, although it would pretty much only take what's coming in from the small cell. But let's say you have a problem at a certain site. And I came across one of these, actually a couple of them in the last month, where the carrier was deploying a new band for LTE and they hadn't optimized it yet. And it was giving their customers some grief. So this system integrator chose to disable band 5 in this case for that operator, so those channels wouldn't be considered for relaying. And then after a few months of network optimization, they'll probably revisit the site remotely. They don't actually have to go to the site, right? That's part of the beauty of having your systems connected to the portal. They'll probably re-enable band 5 and the system will reset and consider band 5. So we've now given you this option. The next feature, this is a change to antenna aiming. Before, what the system would do is test the number of samples over 1 to 5 minutes for a given antenna direction, and it would give you a score. And after testing numerous positions, you would choose generally the highest score, which would be in green. This is different now, especially since we have the Quatra 2000, which is multiple carrier. We need more information, right? So that's why the antenna pointing algorithm has been updated. Rather than giving you a score, it gives you information about the best place to point the antenna for each band and for each operator. And then it's up to you to digest that information and decide where you want to point your antenna. So where do we find it? It's just above settings in that pull down options menu. So we're going to click on that. And it's a two-step process. If you take a look at the left side of the screen here, you will see the usual antenna test buttons. But instead of giving you a score, it just says test successful. And the reason why it's doing this is because it's collecting data on every position before it calculates the best directions to point your antenna. And this is especially important when you're using Quatra 2000, which is a dual carrier system, because you may want to point in, it may seem correct to point for an operator in position 1, but the second antenna may be adding interference in, and this algorithm takes that into account, the second antenna for the second operator. So taking a look at the blue section on the right side of this slide, you can see that you only connect one antenna in order to perform these tests. If it's a Quatra 1000 with a single antenna, then you only have one antenna, right? But if it is a Quatra 2000, you can conceivably have 2 antennas unless both carrier sites are co-located. So we're just going to connect one antenna. You can terminate the extra input if you want, where a second antenna would have fed the system, or you could leave it open. But what the portal's going to do is it's going to test both operators in one sweep. So you don't have to do this twice. In this case, this may be AT&T and Verizon here in the United States. So it'll be testing both AT&T and Verizon at the same time. You'll perform these tests up to 8 positions, and then you're going to press calculate. And you'll be given information about each one of these locations. Now remember, this is a lot more data than you had before. But you'll notice these buttons. Right now we have band 2 is shown for Verizon, and band 12 is shown for AT&T, and there's a little asterisk by band 13 for Verizon and band 12 for AT&T. Those are because those were the best signals that came in any band for either one of those operators, so it gives you an indication of that. Obviously for AT&T, we only have the one operator here, but for Verizon, we've got 2 different bands to consider. Now, if I want to take a look at the best direction to aim my antenna for band 2, then I'm going to select band 2 from this user interface, and I'm going to take a look at these rankings. And of course, the top one that's ranked number 1 is the best direction to aim that Verizon antenna. Then I would select band 13, and I would see which antenna direction was most highly ranked for band 13. Ideally, of course, it's coming from the same direction, but not all bands are always transmitted from all cell sites, so it could be a different direction. But this at least gives you the information so you can decide for yourself based on priority where you'd like to aim your antenna. And the second operator, of course, is being listed at the same time. So you'll take all of this information in, and you'll decide where to point each antenna for each operator, and then you'll go back up to the roof, assuming that's where your donor antennas are, and you will connect the second antenna and aim them in those 2 directions that you saw fit. Now, in this specific example, we know this isn't the norm usually, it turns out that both operators were coming in best at position number 2. Now, of course, in this case, you could just share an antenna because they're both coming from the same tower source, it looks like, but they will usually be different. If you have any questions when you're going through antenna aiming out in the field, please do give our support department a call. This is a bit different, and you may have, again, some questions the first time, but just give us a call, and we'll help guide you through it, because as long as you're connected to the portal, right, we can see the same thing as you do. Lastly, we have the RF KPI alerts. Now, when you click on a network unit or a coverage unit from within a system that you have installed, it sends a command to the system that says, give me real-time data, not just the once-an-hour update, but give me real-time data on what's happening with this system. And this is, of course, where you're going to go in order to see how well you did, right? What we added were these alerts, these triangles, which will only show up if we think that you may be able to get more out of your system. And a perfect example is a signal-to-noise ratio, one of the absolute most important parameters on any deployed system. And that's because bars on a phone, for most phones like Apple and more current Samsung phones, are driven by signal-to-noise ratio when the power levels are on the lower, actually at any power level. You don't want to deploy a system and have lots of power and have your Apple or your Samsung phone user say, hey, how come I still only get 2 bars? And the reason can be that your signal-to-noise ratio is really poor. And you may think, you know, I kind of learned about that in the Nextivity training modules about signal-to-noise and these quality metrics I need to pay attention to. Well, the whole purpose of us putting these alerts on the page is point of use, right? You take a look at this, and it will draw your attention to those KPIs, and you can select one of those little icon triangles, and it'll bring up a window like this and give you some helpful hints on what you can do to improve things, right? Lastly,
so Steve, I got a couple of questions. Can you go back one slide?
Sure.
So when you said select, do I just hover over it? Do I need to click on the triangle? How do I get that to come up?
Just click on it, and it'll open up the window and give you those suggestions.
Okay, and if I follow those suggestions, is it always going to make it go away, the triangle, because I'm always going to get a better score? Is there a situation where
Unfortunately not, right? We're all subject to what exists natively at a specific install site. You know, we've gone into a site because there's a problem in the first place, right? Maybe you can change out to a different donor antenna that has a narrower beam width, or maybe you can aim your antenna a little bit differently and get your signal-to-noise ratio, in this case, to increase. You know what it is for us? It is what it is for a site But what we care about is maximizing the potential based on what you have to work with.
So I'm not always going to get it to be perfect, but I can use these to draw my attention to things that I can try to do better.
Exactly. And that's one reason why I included this last slide, because we've added a new antenna to our portfolio. It is the LPDA, that is Log Periodic Dipole Antenna. Doesn't look like it in this picture, but it's over 1 meter long. It's about 4 feet long, actually, so it's large, but it is fantastic. It also comes with brackets to pitch its polarization at plus or minus 45 degrees to match the polarizations from a base station. And let's face it, we all go to those troubled sites where we just can't get the signal to noise ratios that we want because of network interference. That's not your fault. That's not the system's fault. It's just what is coming into this site. But I've been able to take sites that had signal to noise ratios that were less than 0 dB, -1 and -2, and pull them up to +5, +6 dB. That is an enormous difference and has a tremendous effect on the outcome for your customers. They'll have faster data rates, that's more capacity, and they will show more bars on their phone because the signal to noise ratio is better. So I really, really recommend you checking out that antenna. But again, it's also harder to hide. If your site, if the people are worried about the fact that they just don't want to see an antenna any place, that's what these other antennas can be for. The MIMO panel antenna is a good antenna, and it does clean up signal to noise a little bit. It just doesn't do it as much as the LPDA antenna, but it's far easier to hide, obviously. And if you are at a site where all of the channels are great quality, in a typical place like this would be in a downtown metropolitan area, you're close to street level, and that's where you're going to take your donor signals from. But the signal to noise ratios are actually pretty good because you're not seeing a lot of pilot pollution from a lot of different towers. Now, that would be a location where you could use the dual feed omni antenna, and you don't have to aim that at all, right? And it's okay that certain channels in certain bands will come in at a lower power level, because remember, all Cel-Fi systems treat each channel individually. They gain process each one individually, power control each one individually. So if a channel comes in 30 dB down, we'll give it 30 dB more gain. And you don't have to aim. And this is obviously the easiest way to install a system. So anyway, I recommend you taking a look at this deck and inquiring about that LPDA antenna, especially when you get to those troubled sites. This presentation will be on our webpage under support. Just go to webinars and you'll be able to see or show somebody else this presentation.
And I did want to invite anybody who had any questions for me or Steve, specifically Steve, because he knows the answers, to go ahead and pop those questions into the Q&A section. Steve, you must have been doing a good job, though, because nobody's been asking questions the whole time. Okay, well, we're always here. And again, if you get out to a site and you want to ask some more questions or help you out with the new antenna aiming technique, just give us a call at our support number. Oh, wait, first question just came in. How recently has the Quatra 2000 system been available to be band selective? Is that something new? We just rolled it out with version 044 of software 2.5, 3 weeks ago. So when you go to your system on the portal, if you click on the network unit, and it will bring up the radio screens, you can scroll down to the bottom and you can see the software version. The very top version is the actual network unit firmware version, and it should say, it has a bunch of numbers, but then it trails with 044. If you don't see that, then you can go back to the main screen for your system and force a software update. But if it's connected to the internet, it will update. There's a check every 24 hours, and the system will update on its own. The only reason why it wouldn't do that is because it's not connected to the portal, or because you have software updates disabled in your settings menu. And are Sprint's extended bands available, 20, 25, and 27?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, I'm just reading the questions as they come in.
Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I was thinking of this. Yes, we do band 25, the extra 5 megahertz. So if you have a Quattro 2000 in T-Mobile Sprint mode, yes, you'll get the upper 5 megahertz of band 2, which is band 25.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions for us? In that case, thank you guys all for joining us. This video will be available for live streaming, as we said. And Steve, thank you very much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.